Hi, friends. This week is another episode of Create This Book. We all know what that is at this point, right? Well, if you don't, I have a whole playlist right up here. But I want to try to get through more pages than I usually do, so let's just get into it. Okay, the first page I'm going to do says Create a recorded conversation. Sit in a room with other people. Write down everything you hear. First, there's some obvious bleeding on one side of this spread from a previous page. And normally I would use a separate sheet of paper, but that makes the book thicker, which at this point, who even cares? But I decided to challenge myself to see if I can cover the bleeding in a different way. So first, I'm going to sketch out my idea with a colored pencil because I'm going to use paint markers for this spread. Now, instead of just sitting in a room and listening to a conversation, I decided to switch it up a bit because this is my book and I wanted to do something more fun. As some of you may know, I'm a preschool teacher and principal, and since I have a class of 16 toddlers, you can bet I hear some pretty weird conversations. So I decided to take something one of them said and draw inspiration from that. We were out on the playground one morning, and one of my students was by himself under the jungle gym, and then all of a sudden he ran out and yelled, "I'm in the wind!" I have no idea why he said it because it wasn't particularly windy, or even to who he said it because he was playing alone at the time. And honestly, who can ever be 100% sure what a toddler says? But both my assistant and I heard, "I'm in the wind," so that's what I'm going with. So that got me thinking, why would he be in the wind? Well, maybe he's flying because he's a superhero. But I don't like drawing humans because they come out like this. And this particular child is especially high-pitched and loud, kind of like a chihuahua. So this is a superhero chihuahua. Since I'm using paint markers and not actual paint, I can't mix the exact colors that I want. Or think that I want because I never really know. So I'm starting with whatever I feel like is closest. And you'll see that later they end up completely different. But here we are, just blocking out the sections. I used about 6 different references, and I mean, he's looking pretty good for me never having drawn a chihuahua, but something about his belly area looks weird to me, and I can't figure out why. And his legs just for sure look like cartoon cooked turkey legs. But I did the best I could, so let's keep going. I went back in, section by section, adding different markers over the top to adjust the color, and I added a bit of cell shading and highlights. I also added outlines in a darker version of each color because I wanted him to be defined, but I didn't want to go with a full black outline. In a past video, I used these markers and I struggled with them being dried out at the tip and having some weird unmixed paint come out. But since I started storing these markers on their side instead of cap down, I didn't notice any issues. It does make the markers harder to sift through to find the color I want, so I had to take them all out of the drawer and line them up, but small sacrifices. Also, I am aware that this is looking much more like a corgi than a chihuahua, but A, a bunch of my references had those same markings, and B, that's just his secret disguise. He doesn't want people recognizing him all the time. Either way, up until about here, I was not really loving the look of him. He just looks a little derpy. But when I filled in his nose, mouth, and eyes, he just came to life. Ooh, that little change just made me love him so much. And then add some giant eye shinies and a healthy wet nose shine. Yes, best boy. Now, for the text over here, the actual recorded quote, I'm going for a comic book looking font. I'm not the best at hand lettering, so I just Googled superhero font, and here we are. I went with red for the letters, and then since the black paint marker was kind of showing through the page a little bit where I did the dog's face, I instead went with the darkest gray paint marker that I had to outline and add a drop shadow to the letters. To cover up all of these bleedy bubbles, I have a plan. And if that doesn't work, I have a plan B. So first, I tried to go over this area with a white paint marker to see if that would block out the bubbles. And it did cover a bit, but not as good as I was hoping. So I'm going to go back over all of that with a light blue to make a sort of cloudy poof bubble thing. I want to stick with a very comic-y, pop-arty color scheme of just red, yellow, and blue. But I wanted a different blue than I used before because that was going to be touching the puppy's cape. That's too much explanation, but I was very proud of myself for problem solving here. After all of that was filled in, to finish covering up the rest of the bubbles and just fill in the rest of the background, I added some sunbursty rays in 2 different yellows. Last, to make it stand out a bit more, I added a dark blue outline around the blue bubble. And then, since I was worried about the orangey color of the dog sort of getting lost against the yellow background, I added a white outline around the outside of the dog so that he stands out a bit. I need to stop calling him the dog. His name is Hank. Let me just date this page, and this is done. And I love this page. I love how Hank came out. I love how it sort of turned into a comic book cover. And yeah, if you look really closely, you can still see some of the bubbles bleeding through, but I feel like they aren't noticeable unless you really look for them, and that's what I wanted. And I'm pretty proud of how well I covered the entire spread without using a separate paper. Alright, the next page I'm going to do says, create a pocket. Store something in the pocket that is created between the 2 pages. Now, I sketched this off camera because I had this brilliant idea to make the pocket as the pocket in a dress, because all dresses should have pockets. But the other page in the spread was going to be a zoom out of the dress. And who wears dresses? Humans. Even though I just said I don't like to draw humans, but now that I'm thinking about it, I totally could have drawn a dress on an animal. But honestly, I just fully recreated the silhouette from an old pattern package, and I needed to focus really hard to do that. I don't actually have a fully fleshed out plan yet, so I'm stalling by outlining this whole thing with a black fine liner. The picture that I copied from is a single color, but since the right side of the spread is going to be a zoomed in version of the dress, I don't really want to color the entire page in just one color. Oh no, please pray to the art gods that she doesn't end up with crazy eyes. Whew, not too bad. Anyway, I want to do something more fun with the coloring, so I found this pattern. Because the reference picture was a pattern from the 70s, so yeah. We're going with this, I assume, because I wasn't alive then, very 70s blue and orange flower patchwork pattern. Well, if that didn't sound like a weird Amazon listing. Honestly, this isn't my best coloring work, and it really reminds me of that blanket picture I did with watercolor pencils. But I'm generally a pretty slow artist, like spending hours on one simple picture, and I wanted to not do that. So I actually used my Pomodoro timer for art for the first time, and I tried to just keep this train flying on down the track. I did try to add a little bit of dimension with some darker shadows, and let's just not talk about that. I used a colorless blending pencil to blend it out and make it look less pencil strokey, which really brought my art train down to a crawl. But then it was time to color in the human parts of my human, so I went for a sort of golden brunette hair and then some skin that you can barely see. She and I share the same skin tone, invisible. You know what else I just realized that we share? Invisible eyebrows. Mine are insanely blonde, and hers, I just forgot to give her. Well, crap. I used a purple pastel to color the background because it's easy to just smoosh that color around, and I still have a whole other side of the spread to do. Then I sealed the page in with packing tape so that the pastel wouldn't transfer everywhere. So she will forever be eyebrowless. Now onto the close-up pocket side. And I just went in with the same orange and blue pattern as the dress, except bigger. Obviously. I decided to try this colored pencil blender pen that I'm pretty sure is just alcohol, but my hand does not want to use the pencil blender for the entire page. And I also want to go over this with some darker details, so I'm hoping that this pen won't burnish it all down like the pencil blender does. But is this actually blending the color, or is it just wet? Okay, when I said that I wanted to add some darker details, well, I couldn't really think of any super fancy details to add, so I just added a bit of a gradient around the outside of the flowers and each patchwork square. It's not fancy, but it does look a little bit more interesting. So let me add the date and then seal this in with tape. I'm sealing it in now before I actually make the pocket because I'm hoping that the tape will help make the pocket side stronger and not rip any further as time goes by. I sliced open the pocket and then glued the page shut. Now, as for what I actually am putting in the pocket, I wrote down a few predictions for myself about what life and my channel will be like whenever I finally finish this book. And I'm not going to show you, but whenever I do a final flip through, we'll open it and see if I'm right. So this page is done. It's pretty simple and not the best coloring job I ever did, but my human faces are getting better and overall I like it. So the last page I'm going to do, I didn't get through any more pages than usual, says create an interview. Make a list of questions to ask a friend or family member and record their responses here. So for this one, I created an interview for my niece, who is 4, even though she herself is not quite sure. I included some easy questions like her name and favorite color, and then some sort of deeper questions like what she's good at and what she likes best about herself. Then I took her answers and created a little picture from those. I sketched it out with a yellow mechanical pencil so it'll be easier to color over, and then I outlined the whole thing with a black fine liner. I'm not stalling this time. I actually know what I want to do. And we have another dog. I never thought when starting this video that I'd be drawing 2 dogs, but Evelyn actually mentioned dogs a lot in her interview. Like when she was asked what her parents do for work, she said dogs and making dogs. Neither of their jobs have anything to do with dogs, but she must have had them on her mind because when she was asked what makes her happy, she also said dogs. So here we are. I chose to draw a golden retriever because my niece has the most gorgeous curly blonde hair, but she's actually a little more mischievous than your standard golden retriever, like maybe a lab or a husky. I am liking how this golden is coming out though, a lot more than that Corgiwawa. And this puppy is looking very excited about some cake because Evelyn said that's her favorite food. My sister said she almost never eats cake, but 4-year-olds can dream. And the cake is a completely unappetizing blue because that is Evelyn's favorite color. I did struggle a bit with the shading on this frosting, so I thought maybe some blue sprinkles would help. It didn't really work though. In case you weren't sure what's going on down here, this is a poop tablecloth. When she was asked what she likes to do for fun, Evelyn said pooping. So, poop tablecloth. Most kids her age go through this phase where they're obsessed with talking about poop.
Poop on you, but chicken my but tonight go pooping I go. You meet me like I will poop, I will poop.
Some people never seem to grow out of that phase. Anyway, why does this puppy appear to be at a poop-themed party? Who knows? Maybe it's to celebrate his potty training. I do have a student who brought all the teachers donuts when he finally pooped on the potty. Alright, enough poop talk, let's move on. Last, I colored in the tablecloth pink and the wall purple. There's no special meaning behind these, I just don't want to leave them white. On this side, I'm going to glue in a typed up version of the interview because I am not messing this page up with hand lettering. Then I'll seal the whole spread with matte Mod Podge. And this page is done. I love it. It's simple, but it's so special to me because my niece is such a weird and funny little human being. And that's all the pages I had time for this week. What do you think? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.